So good morning, everyone. Bon matin. We're going to start getting into our first point on the agenda. Again, we have a presentation by three ministers with us to start us off. We'll have the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc, President of the King's Privy Council for Canada, as well as Minister responsible for Canada-US trade, intergovernmental affairs, and the One Canadian economy. We'll also have with us the Honourable Rebecca Alty, Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, as well as the Honourable Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. We'll be giving each of the ministers around 5 minutes to address the Assembly, after which we will come back, take discussions from the floor, and finally go back to them for closing comments and responses. After that, we'll have another panel which will be composed of the Honourable Mandy Gulmasti from Indigenous Services Canada, the Honourable Gary Anandasan-Gari, Minister of Public Safety, the Honourable Rebecca Chartrand, Minister of Northern and Arctic Affairs, as well as the Honourable Buckley Bellinger, who's the Secretary of State for Rural Development. Again, with regards to how we will proceed, we'll be putting 3-minute timers for the interventions from the floor. Again, a power we have as chairs. 2 minutes we found was maybe a little too short the other day. So we'll go back to our 3 minutes for the interventions. We'll try to get as many speakers on the floor, including, again, as you know, microphone 1, 2, and online. Je vais le répéter aussi en français. Il y a de la traduction simultanée qui est disponible. Donc, si vous avez besoin de traduction, vous avez 2 options. Première des choses, sur chaque côté, il y a une transcription qui est faite automatiquement ainsi qu'une traduction, mais vous avez aussi accès à la traduction simultanée en arrière et reconnaître le travail des gens qui travaillent dans la petite cabine au fond de la salle. Je vais essayer de faire mon mieux pour ne pas parler trop vite. So I would look towards our team. If we can have the ministers brought to stage again, starting our day off with the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc, the Honourable Rebecca Alty, as well as the Honourable Tim Hodgson. And I would look towards our distribution team because I will officially call the meeting to order at 9:13. So again, we'll be going towards opening remarks from our 3 guests, and I will turn the microphone over to the Honourable Rebecca Alty, Minister of Crown-Indigenous Relations, to start us off.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. Je tiens tout d'abord à remercier le comité exécutif, le chef national et l'ensemble des membres de l'Assemblée des Premières Nations de nous avoir invités à nous joindre à vous aujourd'hui. Je remercie aussi les aînés qui ont ouvert cette réunion de la meilleure façon qui soit. Je tiens également à saluer l'engagement sans faille des chefs, des animateurs et du personnel de l'AFN qui ont rendu possible la tenue de cette assemblée. Ce n'est pas une tâche facile et je vous remercie pour votre travail. I'm honored to be joining you on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that many nations here are facing another difficult summer because of wildfires, floods, and evacuations. I want to recognize your leadership during these very challenging times. I know it's not easy. I know how demanding this work is before, during, and long after these disruptive events affect communities. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about the work underway, not just as Crown-Indigenous relations, but across government, particularly when it comes to major projects and building a strong future with First Nations. I want to start by sharing some updates on the progress we've made since we last spoke in the fall. Since my appointment, I've approved 76 additions to reserve, 57 last fiscal year and 19 so far this year, representing more than 136,000 acres nationwide, roughly the size of Ottawa. These additions are creating space for housing, services, and First Nations-led economic development. For example, we've more than doubled Member 2 First Nations land base, creating opportunities for housing, businesses, and jobs that benefit both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, and it was an honor to be in community in January to celebrate that. But we also know that the additions to reserve process can be too slow and too complicated. That's why last week we announced that we're seeking feedback on the draft Setting Apart of Lands as Reserve policy, formerly known as Additions to Reserve or ATR policy, which is intended to replace the 2016 policy and make the process faster, simpler, and more responsive to community needs. I want to encourage everyone here to submit their feedback on the draft policy before the September 22nd deadline. On specific claims, we resolved 31 claims last year, worth $2.7 billion. Settling claims helps address past injustice, but it also creates new opportunities. For example, the Peter Chapman Band in Saskatchewan is already building a new band office, a public works garage, sports fields, and 28 new homes. At the same time, we've been focused on addressing the legacy of residential school systems. We announced $104 million for the Residential Schools Missing Children Community Support Fund. To date, 165 nations and organizations have received over $280 million to undertake community-led and survivor-driven initiatives seeking to locate, document, commemorate, and memorialize unmarked burial sites. Applications for this year close on August 15th, so if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to submit one. Earlier this year, we also reached a settlement with former students of the Ile-a-la-Croix School, and applications for compensation remain open for another year. We're continuing to implement a number of the childhood claim settlements that remain open, including the Federal Indian Hospitals class action. Over the past year, I've also heard from many of you about the importance of My Records, My Choice. We're currently developing a communications approach on residential school records to raise awareness among survivors and inform them of the options available to them regarding their records. Now I want to turn to the topic of today's panel, reconciliation in major projects. Building Canada Strong Together. In my discussions with many of you this week and over the past year, you've shared your priorities, challenges, and opportunities as your communities adapt to global pressures and economic uncertainty. I found that the same questions are on many people's minds. Am I going to be okay? Are my kids going to be okay? How can I create more opportunities for the members of my community? These are the same questions driving our work across the federal government. And my message to all of you today is that we're here with resources to ensure that, as we move forward, people and nations have what they need, not just to get by, but to prosper as we do the work of building Canada strong. I know that many of you are accustomed to working with me at Crown-Indigenous Relations or with Minister Galmasti at Indigenous Services Canada. But what I hope to make clear is that the work to support your nations does not only happen at Crown-Indigenous Relations or Indigenous Services Canada. It's happening right across government. We have a number of ministers joining us this morning, including my colleagues Minister Hodgson from Natural Resources, Minister LeBlanc, as well as at the next panel, Minister Galmasti, Minister Chartrand, Secretary of State Buckley, and Minister Ananda Sangri. Each of these ministers and their departments have a role to play, and they're already advancing this important work. I've been handing out information packages over the week that outline a number of programs being delivered across government. If you'd like a copy, please feel free to speak with one of my teammates. As a government, we want to make sure that you know about these resources, can access them, and most importantly, understand how they can support your nation's priorities and visions for the future. We've established the Indigenous Advisory Council to the Major Projects Office and are increasing support for Indigenous participation in major projects. Earlier this year, I announced 2 new consultation resource centres, one in northern Manitoba, and one in British Columbia, and one will be coming in Ontario soon. These investments are ensuring that communities are equipped to support training, tools to participate meaningfully in consultation on projects that affect them. At the same time, we're investing tens of millions of dollars through CanNor, the Major Projects Office, and the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada to build capacity and ensure that consultations are done in a good way that reflect the realities and priorities of communities. And we're working with First Nations-led institutions, including the First Nations Finance Authority, on special purpose vehicles to expand access to affordable capital and create more opportunities for Indigenous equity ownership in major projects. And as I hear, Ernie Daniels is now called Earning Daniels, based on the success that the First Nations Finance Authority has had over the past year. Finally, to ensure the benefits that come along with major projects like jobs and wages actually reach the people we serve, we've also launched Team Canada Strong, a comprehensive plan to hire 100,000 skilled trade workers to build Canada Strong. Under our plan, the Apprenticeship Training Grant, we will provide a $400 weekly top-up while apprentices attend mandatory in-class training. We'll also offer a one-time $5,000 apprenticeship completion bonus to those who graduate and obtain certification in a Red Seal trade. This represents a total payment of up to $16,000 per apprentice, paid in addition to employment insurance. And for employers, we'll provide up to $10,000 to cover the cost of an apprentice's first-year salary. Together, these measures are about ensuring that as Canada grows and builds, First Nations are not only consulted, but are partners, decision-makers, and owners in the opportunities created. I could go on, but I know my colleagues also want to speak to this important work. So my point is this: as we advance new infrastructure and major projects across the country, we know that true success depends on working alongside First Nations, respecting your rights and self-determination, and upholding our duty to consult and our modern treaty obligations. As the Prime Minister has said, it's not just about what we build, it's about how we build. For me, that means listening and working together so that projects reflect First Nations priorities, create lasting opportunities, and strengthen communities. So thank you again for your leadership and partnership. I deeply appreciate the work you do on behalf of your nations and communities. Merci, thank you, and masicho.
Well, Minister Alty. Our next speaker will be the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc, President of the King's Privy Council for Canada, as well as Minister responsible for Canada-US trade, intergovernmental affairs, and One Canadian economy. Minister LeBlanc.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Good morning. Thank you, Rebecca, for those comments. Thank you, Tim, also for joining Rebecca and me on this important panel. National chief, regional chiefs, chiefs who have come from across the country to be here. We're honored to have this opportunity to spend a few minutes with you. I align myself entirely with the opening comments that Rebecca just made. Firstly, I would like to recognize all of the important work that all of you do to improve the lives of the people who live in your communities and the people you represent. The Government of Canada, all of us here, our colleagues that aren't here, entirely share that objective with you. In the face of economic uncertainty, Canada is focused on what we can control, and it compels us to work together in a spirit of partnership and respect to advance our shared priorities to build a stronger economy that benefits everyone together. As we transform our economy by advancing major nation-building projects in every part of the country, we will uphold the rights of Indigenous people, as is our constitutional obligation and as our laws require, and we will seek to bring your communities and the rights holders that you represent in as full partners in these projects, creating generational economic opportunities for everyone. That is what the Prime Minister has said publicly. That is what he says to us privately. And that is a commitment, obviously, my colleagues and I are happy to reiterate here again this morning. Already, we have made considerable progress, but further work is obviously required to ensure that Canada has a clear and effective regulatory framework that will attract the investment necessary to build this economy and accelerate major projects and drive Canada's long-term growth. To that end, we have been engaged in a series of proposed legislative changes. I've had a chance to discuss these with your national chief and many in this room and others. These proposed changes would establish, for example, a one-year timeline for federal reviews and decisions, create a Crown consultation hub to coordinate a single federal consultation process per community, per project. And it would support the creation of federal economic zones through regional impact assessments in collaboration with Indigenous peoples and provinces and territories as well. La période de consultation se termine le 22 juillet. Merci à ceux et celles d'entre vous qui nous ont déjà fait part de vos commentaires et n'hésitez pas évidemment à partager vos réactions, vos suggestions sur ces propositions aujourd'hui également et pendant que la période de consultation demeure encore ouverte. Nous sommes déterminés d'aller de l'avant rapidement, mais surtout, nous nous engageons à travailler en partenariat avec vous pour faire les choses de la bonne façon afin d'avancer dans le respect de vos droits, de vos territoires et de vos communautés. C'est pourquoi nous consacrons, par exemple, 40 millions de dollars pour renforcer la capacité de vos communautés de participer au processus de mobilisation concernant les projets que nous voulons inscrire à la loi visant à bâtir le Canada. Your feedback, conversations with all of you, with your national chief, with regional chiefs and others, will guide our work in drafting this legislation. Much feedback has already been received. I'm told that more is coming, and we very much appreciate that. Final thing, as I highlight the contributions of the Major Projects Office, Indigenous Advisory Council, I think it's important just to be unequivocal and clear with you. This Advisory Council to the Major Projects Office in no way replaces the direct nation-to-nation engagement with rights holders. That is our constitutional responsibility and that we look forward to doing with you with respect and we hope with outcomes that benefit your rights holders, the people you represent, and Canada as well. This Advisory Council and some of the people who volunteered to help the Major Projects Office with this Advisory Council are here today. It serves to ensure that the Major Projects Office does this the right way, but as Rebecca mentioned briefly, the Major Projects Office, I thought it was just important because there has been some confusion around that issue to be very clear. And with that, I look forward to working with you to build on the collaborative relationship and efforts that have been taking place over the last number of weeks and months. And I very much look forward to the First Ministers and First Nations meeting that will take place this fall in Ottawa in October. As you increasingly become proponents and partners in many of these major national projects, we look forward to working together with you, to move forward with you. Everyone at the table will build a stronger country for everyone. So thank you very much for inviting me this morning. Merci beaucoup. J'ai hâte à la période des questions. Thank you very much.
Again, Willalen to the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc. And now our final speaker for this panel is the Honourable Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources.
Thank you so much. Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the Assembly of First Nations for inviting me to be with you this morning on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. It is a privilege for me to share time with you today, and I look forward to the discussions. I would also like to acknowledge National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak. Thank you for inviting me here today. The Assembly of First Nations Regional Chiefs, thank you. Elders, chiefs, youth, and community leaders from across the country, thank you for having me here. Echoing Minister Alty and Minister LeBlanc's comments, I come here with a simple message. There is no good way to build major projects without First Nations partnership and leadership. Full stop. I'll say it again. There is no good way to build major projects without First Nations partnership and leadership. Today, we see First Nations are builders, owners, and partners in some of the most important energy, infrastructure, and resource projects we have underway in this country. That work and the real projects are creating jobs and prosperity that can be handed down to future generations. First Nations direct participation is improving projects by ensuring they are built in a way that protects and honors the land, traditions, and the environment, and the communities in which they are built. Of course, a key part of this approach is the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program. I'm proud that one of Prime Minister Carney's new government's first acts was to double the program from $5 to $10 billion and open it to more sectors of the economy so that more First Nations can invest in resource, energy, transportation, and infrastructure projects on their own terms. As many of you know, this program has been a real success. Just last month, the Williams Treaty First Nations invested over $700 million to become equity partners in the Darlington New Nuclear Project in Bowmanville, representing one of the largest Indigenous investments in a major infrastructure project in Canadian history. Just this week, 5 First Nations signed a deal for up to a $1 billion majority equity ownership stake in the storage tanks associated with LNG Canada Phase 2. This creates the potential for one of Canada's largest Indigenous stakes in any energy infrastructure in our history. And I would like to quote Haisla Chief Councillor Maureen Nice here, who said of this agreement, "It marks a defining point in our collective history, one where Indigenous equity and ownership in energy infrastructure can become the norm, not the exception." Further, next week I'll be in British Columbia to celebrate the groundbreaking of the Sunrise Natural Gas Transmission Expansion Program, the project for which the federal government provided its very first loan guarantee. A guarantee for 36 First Nations to take a 12.5% ownership interest in Enbridge's West Coast natural gas pipeline system. In addition to loan guarantees in my department, the Indigenous Natural Resource Partnership Program has also been renewed, so we can continue to support community capacity, partnership development, and participation in energy and natural resource projects. And of course, Indigenous partnership is key to the work being done by the Major Projects Office, as was alluded to by Minister LeBlanc, including through the Indigenous Advisory Council. First Nations voices have been key to many of the decisions we've made over the last year and a half. Since I was here last summer, perhaps the most significant demonstration of this is that we recently reached an agreement with Alberta and British Columbia to advance energy infrastructure proposals while ensuring the North Coast tanker ban will be maintained, which is, of course, something that was strongly advocated for by coastal First Nations in British Columbia. Before we open the floor, on behalf of our government, I'd like to thank you for your vision and for your leadership. Most of all, I thank you for your honesty and your willingness to take the time today and at many points to share your perspectives and experience in a way that helps us, the new federal government, build Canada better. I'll stop here because my goal is to talk to you about what you would like to talk about. I'm happy to listen and to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister Hodgson. Again, so just as a few notes on the process, we'll be going around microphone 1, 2, and online. Quick reminder for those joining us online, you do need to use the raise hand function so that I as chair can see you and give you the floor. We'll be keeping it to 3 minutes each. Please and thank you for your collaboration, as well as making sure that you do state your name and community just to help along with the process. And finally, as a quick reminder, the microphones are reserved for chiefs and proxies, so please respect that. Microphone number 1, please.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, ministers. Okay, I'll just get right to the point. For 3 straight years, our nation has asked for transparency, and for 3 straight years, the Crown and its corporate partners have given us deflections. The Pathways Alliance carbon capture project is being rammed down our throats without our genuine informed consent. Let it be entirely clear, our ancestors signed Treaty 6 to share the land, but we never surrendered the deep porous space beneath us. We will not allow our traditional territory to be treated as an underground garbage dump for multi-billion-dollar oil companies. Reconciliation is not a buzzword to use while fast-tracking pipelines behind our backs. If you want to build through our territory, you face us directly as a sovereign government, not through organizations, not through toothless regulatory rubber stamps. We demand answers to the following questions today. On subsurface rights and consent, by what legal authority do corporations and the government claim that the right to occupy the deep subsurface pore space beneath Treaty 6 territory without the unanimous consent of the title holders? Since the Assembly of First Nations explicitly voted that the national bodies cannot negotiate major projects on our behalf, when will the Crown halt its backroom dealings and face individual First Nations governments directly? On risk-reward environment safety, how can you defend a framework where Cold Lake First Nations bears 100% of the long-term environment risk to our waters tables while seeing 0% of the economic benefits of equity? Why should billions of dollars in Canadians' tax subsidies funds this infrastructure when the oil sands consortium refuses to pay to clean up its own emissions? Where is the transparency? Publicly disclose emergency management plan to protect our community from potential CO2 pipeline leakage or catastrophic rupture. On regulatory fast-tracking, why is the federal government backing a draft corporation agreed that defers to Alberta's regulatory systems when Cold Lake First Nations explicitly states it rejects First Nations rights? Why have both levels of government allowed the Alberta Energy Regulator to bypass our comprehensive environment assessment before regional First Nations have finished assessing the impacts of the water tables? So we've been asking for years to meet with you guys, so nobody's deflecting their questions, to meet with Canada, the provincial government, and industry. You know, how do you build up the trust? You know, and Alberta's chiefs are asked for regulatory reform. You know, lots of spills happen from operator mistakes. You know, so it kind of ticks me off when I've been asking these questions for years, and then people are making decisions without us at the table. But I'll just leave it at that because I'm getting very frustrated. So, Masi.
Thank you, Chief Jacko. Microphone number 2.
Good afternoon, or good morning. My name is Byron Lewis. I'm the proxy holder for Lower Schmelkameen Indian Band in British Columbia. And this is to what I'd like to bring to the attention is Copper Mountain, which is the fourth largest copper mine in British Columbia, or in Canada, I should say. And the tailing pond on there, that's the second largest in the world. And one of the things that holding pond is 7 times larger in Mount Holly, and we all know the disaster of that. There has been no full environmental assessment on the fourth largest copper mine in Canada. The approval increase will add 100 additional meters to the additional holding pond. Okanagan sockeye account for 97% of all sockeye that are produced in the Columbia system. And what this also accounts for is the Schmelkameen River accounts for 75% of all flows in the Okanagan River below the confluence at Orville, Washington. Current trends are that Chinook salmon populations in the Columbia River are low, particularly in the upper regions. And Columbia River Chinook are the primary source for the 75 resident killer whale populations that are off the west coast of British Columbia. And they are endangered, considered critically endangered. When you're looking at this is nothing as more that would be covered. What industry likes to talk about is reclamation bonds that are supposed to cover off flows, damages, such, and reclamation. What exactly is that going to cover off the loss? And when you think about it, it's also on Columbia, it also has that the Bolt decision, which includes 4 lower tribes in Washington state that are Warm Springs, Yakima, and Nez Perce, and Umatilla. And they have staff of over 150 employees that's greater in the province of British Columbia. And that's just one tribe. There's 4 of them. Colville Confederated Tribes has 165. So that is going to result in, that's under the Bolt decision, they had 50% of all stocks originating in the Columbia system. So if this dike ever blows like it did in Mount Holly, one of the things that you're not going to only have is the Okanagan Nation going to launching a lawsuit. You're going to have all the Critfic tribes and Colville Confederated tribes and the Lower River tribes. And when you think about it, with the resident stocks off the west coast of Vancouver Island, think of what the significance of those killer whales are to the people on the west coast. Because those are and where exactly is the consultation and accommodations that would actually protect or allow for that? And they refuse to do an environmental assessment on the system. So when we're talking about all this goodwill and about improvements and how copper is now a part of the critical minerals that Canada claims, where's the consultation and where's the goodwill and where's that going to happen with people that are directly affected by that mine? So let's talk about that, because you're talking about the infringement of an Aboriginal right and a significant potential extinguishment of an Aboriginal right. And when we're talking about this, I think that's one of the things that we need to understand. Provincial governments may say, oh, we approve these mines, but provincial governments do not possess the constitutional authority to extinguish an Aboriginal right. But through their very acts, there is a potential of that. We have 6 subpopulations of British Columbia mountain caribou that are now extinct.
I'd ask you to go towards closing.
Okay, and I'll close it with that. But that is some of the issues, and there is no environmental appeal or reviews. We need that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And moving towards our Zoom call, I do not see any of the chiefs and proxies online using the raise hand function, so we'll go back to microphone 1, please.
Chief Jenny Brigg, Hollaboo First Nation, Newfoundland. I would like to make a comment around the apprenticeship efforts made by the Canadian government right now. I understand that you're investing in wage subsidies that help folks get work, but the fundamental flaw in the system is with the apprenticeship process itself. I have been a 4th-year welding apprentice for 20 years. The issue that comes with getting to Red Seal designation and becoming a journey person is with having folks leave their families and go to rural centers to do block training. I was a young single mother with a child at home that could not afford to pay rent, feed my child, and pay rent in a rural center and be away from work. I've worked in advocacy for trades for 20 years for women and Indigenous people, and 90% of apprenticeships never leave pre-apprenticeship. Some get to first level, some get to second, but very few, as you probably already know, achieve Red Seal designation. You can put all the money you want into wage subsidies, but getting folks off their tools and back into the classroom to complete their block training to that Red Seal designation will never happen unless you meet them where they are at. You need to go to their communities, make mobile units available, bring that training to them, have online training. There's all kinds of ways that we can meet people where they're at. We proved that during COVID. But until you adapt these models with the apprenticeship forum in the provinces, you will never ever achieve those goals and meet your 5% procurement goals that you have set. Thank you.
Voluntary break. We'll continue for a few more moments again. I don't think we'll get to all the speakers, so just saying that right up front. Microphone number 2.
Adi, Sazi, Wilf Adams, Atni, Lake Babinan, Abadai Asli, Jane Hunzu, Jane Atan, Nchawa Yittik. Good morning, gentlemen, and Miss Alty. Sorry. My name is Wilf Adam. I'm chief of Lake Babine in a central part of British Columbia. And Minister, we met in Nanaimo when you were Department of Fisheries and Oceans Minister. And at that time, you talked about a new strategy for fisheries. We haven't yet seen the new strategy yet. Hopefully it will come soon. This is many years, Minister. I bring that up mainly because Lake Babine, we have a large territory in the central part of British Columbia. And Prince Rupert Gas Transmission is proposing a pipeline to go through 120 miles through our territory. And in the western part of our territory, it goes under the river. The river provides the salmon to our communities. And the salmon that we all live by, we need proper consultation. As the minister, you said that, there was no better way to talk to First Nations about major projects. Proper consultation is the most effective way in dealing with us on a truly honest relationship that we can do. I'd like to tell you about the forestry in our territory. When we looked at the forestry, we were only less than 1% of our whole territory about the forestry.
30 seconds.
Now we're about 65%. We can do projects, we can manage projects, and we can do it in a proper way. So I'm encouraging the Government of Canada to work with us to make sure that, we do the proper consultation with the people that will be affected. So I really want to ensure that, proper consultation is always up front. And let's do it. Ms. Haicho.
Thank you, Chief Adams. I don't have anyone online, so we'll go back again to microphone 1, please.
Haichka, Aitsquel, Aitsep, Welliot, and the Pack, Lachalawatsa, Tani Hiwak, Likes, and Tani Tlactinas, Tani Kawatsan Nation. Just want to acknowledge the territory that we're gathered on today, and thank you for the early morning prayers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just want to acknowledge the presenters here today, and thank you for being here. And note that I'm speaking on behalf of my home community of Hodgson on the west coast here in Canada. Our territory sits in the heart of one of Canada's greatest economic corridors and something that's been identified recently as a priority. And as Canada advances its agenda on major projects and regulatory streaming and building a stronger Canadian economy, I want to emphasize a critical point, and some of you raised it in your presentation. Economic growth and First Nations rights cannot be placed in competition with each other. It's not an either-or. We as First Nations cannot be expected to continually quietly absorb colonial violence that is thrust against our people and our territories while we act as though it's all in the good of the economy. It is 2026 and the days of the Crown running roughshod over our rights and title are over. And I say that, thank you. And I say that because we in our territory are witnessing increasing pressure from major project infrastructure, marine shipping proposals in our territory, including the associated work with the Port of Vancouver and Roberts Bank, Delta Port. Decisions made in Ottawa have a direct impact on our waters, our fisheries, our culture and heritage, and our Aboriginal rights and title. The recent recognition of the Kawatsan Nation title to the Tlektinis village site, that decision should serve as a reminder that we are not stakeholders in these discussions. We are rights holders and we are governments. If Canada is pursuing a one project, one review approach, that process must not come at the expense of nation-to-nation discussions, meaningful engagement, consultation, and consent-based decision-making, and the respect for our inherent rights, which are protected by Section 35 of the Constitution. And I know I heard all the good words today, and yet we heard the announcement of the MOU between Canada and British Columbia on the news. There was no conversation with our communities and no conversation about the impacts to our rights. We also found out about the Alberta proposal. We know that we had the Aboriginal Indigenous Advisory Monitoring Commission that was set up on TMX, and then it was pulled, and now that would be a great source of infrastructure to assist us in some of these conversations. So I just need to say that as Canada advances its agenda on this stronger economy, our rights cannot be placed at the back of the line. We cannot be the afterthought. We cannot be the one where you come with buckets of money. When we say we want economic prosperity, we do, but not at the expense of future generations. And that's what makes being Kwamach different than the average Canadian. We're not here to make money. We're here to make sure that the lands and the waters and the territories are here for our children, our grandchildren, and all 7 generations to come.
And for the record, Chief, if I can ask, for the record, which committee and your name?
I said it, but Chalawatza, Shana Thomas, Hereditary Chief, Layaxan First Nation, Kawatsan Nation, and
Thank you very much. We'll try to get to maybe 1 or 2 more questions. We'll see how long we have, but I'll go to microphone number 2.
Chukonach. Glad to see that you made it through the night. I just want to acknowledge the territory that we're on this morning, and I also want to acknowledge the First Nations, especially the community that was devastated with the fires, forest fires. That is just heartbreaking and just devastating. So I just want to acknowledge them this morning, and my prayers are with them. My name is Rhonda Phillips, and I'm Gukbi, Chief of Hatsuth First Nation within Secwepemc Ulu, which is now now called British Columbia, or within British Columbia. So, ministers, I just want to thank you for being here today. You've spoken about advancing major projects to strengthen Canada's economy, and you've committed that First Nations will be full partners in that work. I want to believe that commitment. I truly want to, and I believe that a lot of the other leaders that are in this room and the observers are also want to believe that. So, but for many First Nations, we've heard similar promises before. Too often, partnership has meant being consulted after priorities have already been established, after timelines have already been set, and after governments have largely decided where they want to go. That is participation in someone else's process. It is not partnership. In Hatsuth territory, we are already living with the cumulative effects of development. I heard Mount Poly was brought up this morning already. We have mining, and it's not just Mount Poly. We have Gibraltar, we have Spanish Mountain Gold, we have Caribou Gold, and a bunch of other placer mines that are going on. We have forestry, rail, roads, transmission corridors, goes right through our reserve. Even the railway goes right through our reserve, and other industrial activities that go across our lands. Each project may be assessed on its own, but our people live with the combined impacts. We continue to witness declining salmon returns. Southern mountain caribou remain at risk. Moose populations within our traditional hunting areas continue to decline. These are not just environmental concerns. They affect our food security, our culture, our responsibilities to future generations, and our ability to exercise our inherent rights.
30 seconds.
When First Nations have to pursue emergency protections for species at risk, because existing processes have failed to prevent further decline, it should concern all of us. It tells us that our current approach is not adequately balancing economic development with ecological sustainability. So my question is, when you say First Nations will be full partners in advancing major projects, what does that mean in practice? Will we have a meaningful role in deciding whether projects proceed, how they proceed, and under what conditions they proceed? Or are we simply being invited to participate in a process where the destination has already been decided? So if Canada is serious about reconciliation and economic prosperity, then First Nations cannot simply be stakeholders who are consulted. We must be governments whose rights, laws, knowledge, and decisions help shape the outcome from the very beginning. Minister, partnership is not measured by how early we are invited into the room. It is measured by whether we are genuinely sharing in the decisions, the benefits, and the accountability. I look forward to hearing what the full partner means to your government.
Thank you. We'll go to one final speaker. I see we do have Chief Greg Gabriel from Penticton Indian Band. If we can have him put up on screen. And again, for our technicians, if we can have him on our DSMs, please. If we could have Chief Greg Gabriel unmuted and put up on our screens, please. Chief Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, or good afternoon over there, I think. I just wanted to make some comments. Oh, crap.
We can still hear you, Chief Gabriel.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyway, over the past couple of days, I found some of the presentations and the comments by other chiefs very true and very honest. One of the comments that really stuck with me is, and this is for the ministers and the Prime Minister himself, that one of the elders that spoke said that we've went through 5 prime ministers and we're still having the same discussions. And some of the remarks I heard this morning referenced the same old messaging that we hear you, we want to work with you, and more importantly, we want to respect your title and rights, not affirm them, but respect them. I think we need to get away from that rhetoric, and I really want to call on the ministers and the Prime Minister to address what's really happening out in our First Nations lands. You know, our lands have been devastated, polluted, contaminated. You know, we're still hearing about clean drinking water that has never been fixed after 5 prime ministers. Housing is an issue, but more importantly right now, there is so much uncertainty throughout Canada because of this racist rhetoric that's being thrown around each and every day. One in particular issue that I really have a problem with is when the residential school denialism wasn't included in the hate crime legislation. That's just another insult to all of our residential school survivors.
30 seconds, Chief.
Now you have another premier wanting to take our First Nations lands and give it to the United States. That kind of rhetoric needs to be addressed and called out. You know, as a chief of the St. Pinkton Indian Band here in the Okanagan Nation, I really stand behind all those chiefs and the province of Alberta, but I want commitment from the ministers and the Prime Minister to call all of that racism out. And if you're going to work together with us, let's put something in writing. Don't just tell us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Gabriel. Again, that will be our final speaker for this section. I would look towards our ministers for response and closing comments.
Thank you so much to the speakers. Many comments and questions. So to start, Chief Jacko, for the Pathways project, the proponent is now looking to proceed. There was a question on whether they wanted to, or not, whether they were going to proceed or they weren't going to proceed, which is where the consultation and engagement hasn't happened yet. But now that they're looking to proceed, the consultation, the duty to consult does begin. So that will be coming. In regards to the apprenticeships, yes, I hear you. I'm the Member of Parliament for the Northwest Territories, so definitely a challenge. And wherever you are in the audience, if we can connect you with ESDC, Minister Haidu, and Minister to talk further about the supports that are needed, happy to do those connections. Many comments on respecting rights. 100%. That is our commitment as well as our legal duty. And what does full participation look like? For many projects, we're seeing more and more they're Indigenous-led. When, for example, one of the projects that was referred to the major projects in November was Iqaluit Hydro, which is Inuit-led project. So we're seeing more and more that it's not a non-Indigenous proponent. It's actually the Indigenous proponent that's leading. And so really seeing that as more and more projects come forward. Grays Bay is another example. So there's projects across the country where it is an Indigenous proponent, and that's the ultimate goal we'd like to see. Chief, for the last comment, racism and the increase, it's completely unacceptable. For Bill C-9, what the government was working to address was the increase in violence around churches, synagogues, mosques. Residential school denialism is very important and something we have to address. However, the bill hadn't done the legislative analysis, and one of the things that we now are looking at is whether it's legislative or other. There was a commitment of $5 million to address residential school denialism, so that work is underway. But again, that Bill C-9 was, the legislative review was about how do we address the violence that we're seeing, shootings, etc., at religious institutions.
So thank you. If I may, I entirely agree with what Rebecca provided as responses to many of the thoughtful questions and interventions that we heard. So thank you to those that spoke out and spoke up. I always learn a great deal from these occasions, and I think Rebecca touched on a number of specific issues. I'll go through very quickly the few. I know we're out of time. I'll go through very quickly a few pages of notes that I took. Happy to follow up specifically, obviously, as well, and I know Tim may want to add something. Chief, when you talked about having agreements with provinces and territories around a single project review. Many provinces have agreed with us about streamlining the review project, the environmental, for example, review. In no way does that decision for Canada and a province or territory to work together on streamlining our processes, in no way does that diminish the responsibility of the Government of Canada to uphold the constitutional rights of Indigenous peoples and to do those consultations as the federal Crown in a way that respects and honors those commitments. So it's not a way to go around or diminish or somehow reduce that obligation. It's a way, if it's done properly, to get to those Indigenous consultations as the federal Crown in a nation-to-nation way more quickly, because a number of other issues can be triaged between the Government of Canada and provinces, but it doesn't apply to our obligation in terms of Indigenous rights holders. I think it's important just to reassert that. A number of you mentioned issues around fisheries. I do remember those meetings. It was a long time ago, Chief. I was Fisheries and Oceans Minister 7.5 years ago. I do remember those conversations in Nanaimo. I met a number of chiefs in Vancouver yesterday afternoon and early evening. They talked about fisheries issues as well in the context of some of the developments around the Port of Vancouver. Absolutely understand the importance, including the Columbia River and the potential of what that would mean in terms of pipeline expansions. That's precisely why we think those consultations and the conditions that will follow any potential approval or listing need to take into account the views of and the participation, the full participation, not as an afterthought. I'll finish with this. A number of you said, well, and I understand the history and I understand why people would think that the consultation and the way to get to the outcomes that respect your Indigenous rights, but also benefit the people that you represent that want to benefit in the right way from these projects. The Prime Minister has been clear with us. The approach has to be full partnership from the beginning of the conversations. In the case, for example, of the Memorandum of Understanding between British Columbia and Canada, or as Rebecca said, in the Pathways project, once those projects become real and not somebody's conversation in a meeting in some hotel meeting room somewhere in Canada, but once there is a real project, that's when the consultations with the additional capacity building have to take place in a respectful, early way and in an ongoing way. It's not about doing it one time or 4 times to say we've done it. It's about that ongoing partnership through the life of these projects that uphold and respect your rights, but do so in a way that will benefit the people that you've been elected to represent as well. So that would be a few comments that I had. Maybe Tim wants to add something.
I won't repeat the things that Minister Alty and Mr. LeBlanc have said. For me, what I hope comes from these conversations is more opportunities like the Sunrise transmission expansion project, where hundreds of millions of dollars of equity is now in the hands of First Nations, that more things like the Darlington new nuclear project, where hundreds of millions of dollars of equity is now in the hands of First Nations, creating own source revenue. I see the opportunities coming through the pipeline of projects for more things like LNG Canada 2, with an opportunity for $1 billion of equity to be in the hands of First Nations. I saw in the newspapers this morning that an Indigenous-led, Indigenous majority-owned LNG project, Cedar LNG, just got approval from British Columbia to expand, which will mean more own source revenue for the First Nations involved in that project. I know there are many things we still have to work on, but there's some opportunity. There's opportunity here. There's opportunity for own source revenues that can be game changers. And for me, I hope these dialogues lead to more examples like this. And as Chief Nice said, that First Nations ownership becomes the norm on major projects, not the exception. And that's what this government wants to see. So thank you.
Thank you, ministers. And again, we had said that we will not have any more speakers for this section. So we'll bring us to a close. I'd like to thank Minister Alty, Minister LeBlanc, and Mr. Hodgson for being here with us today. And again, maybe next time we can get a little more time. We do have a small token of appreciation that will be given by our regional chiefs.